I think do you know what, I'll be honest, I must be a manic depressive, because about 15 minutes after I got my advance from HarperCollins, I was depressed.
Yeah, well, you always does it.
Oh God.
Is that because you spent it all?
Yeah, that was in the Argos catalogue already. I didn't work in a chippy, but we've had a very similar...
the only job that you haven't had.
Probably is, actually, when you think about it. So I've been a bin man, I've been a bouncer, I've been oh God, what was it? I sold underpants in the Caribbean, I've worked in bars, I've countless jobs, ridiculous. I was a copper for like 10 years, like Paul, I was a copper for 10 years, which was my civil servant moment where you had that point where you just went, you know what, I better get a proper job. You know, I think that was, I'd just come home from the Med, I'd been working in the Med on a cruise ship, and I come home and thought, I've got to get a job, you know, because me then fiancée was like, you know, stop me. Start paying the mortgage. So I settled down, I became a copper for like 10 years. But like you, I did no writing whatsoever. Up until I started writing, it's 3 years, maybe 2 years ago for me, I did no writing whatsoever. I got a year in my English O level at school. I was terrible at school, I was thick. Luckily enough, I scraped a D in my metalwork and a C in my geography, which got me in the police. I was monumentally thick.
I wouldn't have thought that the police were looking for people who got metalwork.
No, but no, I think they were looking at me. I was obviously intended to be the brute, you know, the back of the road, as opposed to being the detective.
He did metalwork in school.
Yeah, you know,
he did metalwork in school.
We need to headlock with a shoe, you know.
10 years in total that I've been writing seriously, but I wrote little bits as a kid. But I came from a very shitty council estate in North Manchester, poor single parent background. So there was always that thing where you've got a bit of a brain, you've got to get a job that will pay the bills. So I quite wanted to go into fine art, where it was like, well, you're good at art, but you're not going to pay the bills, you're good at languages. So I was brilliant at German. I ended up doing a degree in German and Dutch. And mindful of the fact that I had to get a sensible job, because no one wants to keep being skint if you can get out of that, you know. But when I was a student, which is, you know, we're going back to 1990 or something, I wrote a novelisation of an epic Dutch poem, right, from the 12th century, because that seemed like a really fucking great thing to write.
Very commercial.
But it was about Charlemagne the Great, actually, and at the time, I thought that I made a brilliant kind of fantasy story, and I wrote the first draft over 2 summer holidays, and just left it for 17 years. I thought, this is a pile of shit. And I went back to it 17 years later when I'd had kids, and I read it, and it was an absolute pile of crap. But sometimes people will get a lucky break and suddenly lurch into a writing career. For me, it was the bottom fell out of my world, because I'd had these really boring jobs. It was a bit like wrapping chips. I was never suited to anything, really. I'd been a professional fundraiser for donkey's years, working in children's charities, and I'd always aspired to do something more interesting, like I tried to get in a band, but again was always lured back to the day job because I needed to pay the bills, so never quite threw myself into it properly. And then, I got this boring fundraising job, went from job to job. Every year or so I'd just get bored and move on. And when I had my kids, I thought, I'm really bloody miserable, I can't do this anymore. I'm going to give up work and do up houses. I'm going to be Sarah Beanie. So we kept buying shitty houses, and I'd do them up, and then we'd move. And I thought, well, this is great. I'm good at this. I enjoy this. It's quite creative. I'm going to be a property developer. And we kept moving house, and it was bloody knackering, but we were young, so we could still do it.
Not as many kids as Sarah Beanie.
No.
Already had plenty of your own.
The body's wrecking up as it is. But so I thought, right, I'm going to do this for a living, and it was about 2009, and we'd bought a house in Radcliffe, did that up, we'd bought a terrace, and I thought, this is my first kind of separate project, so I don't have to keep moving. Fine, did that up. I thought, right, I've got my eye on a mill over there, I'm going to buy it, turn it into flats. And get myself horrendously in debt. Credit crunch happened, couldn't get a mortgage anymore, rang the bank and said, do you think I could get hold of 100 grand to buy this shitty old mill and do it into flat? Ha 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 ha, down the phone. And that was the end of my property development career. I'm like, shit, what am I going to do? I can't go back to fundraising. I absolutely hate it. I was good at it, but I hated it. And then I thought, well, do you know what? I've got kids now, and I love children's books. I'm going to start writing for them.
I did write through school. It was the only thing I was really interested in at school. I was useless at maths and science. I was interested in history and English. And English as in creative writing rather than, I mean, to my shame, I didn't much enjoy reading great novels in that era. Work-wise, when I'd finished my education, I went into the police, graduated into the police. It seems like a bit of an about turn for someone who wanted to, who wanted to write. But I think by the time I got to my early 20s, I was sort of, I'd had all kind of ambition to be a writer kind of knocked out of me a little bit. Not in a nasty way. I just was looking for what would be a paying job, what would be a good career. I was in the cops for a few years. Certainly gave me a few good ideas. A bit of background material for what would follow. But I left the police. I was only in my sort of mid-20s, so I wasn't. I was still thinking I might have a career somewhere else. Went into journalism, trainee journalism initially down south, and came back north. Worked on a few titles in the northwest: Wigan Evening Post, Wigan Observer, Manchester Evening News. But at the same time, I'd started submitting speculative scripts to the Bill. The reason I did, the Bill was in the height of its power. This was the kind of late 80s. The Bill was at the height of its power. I mean, they did something like 3 episodes a week and never took a break, which is quite unusual.
Soap opera almost.
Almost. Well, in the end, it did, and I think that's why it ultimately died. But I mean, it was like a soap opera, but it was freestanding 1-hour dramas. It was a phenomenal turnover. And I went down regularly to the studios, first at Wood Lane in West London, then in Wimbledon, and it was like a little town, the whole operation. And they'd be filming, in the corridors outside the script editor's office. The police station corridors were actually all over the studio. All worked very well.
I took a long time to write it. It didn't occur to me that you could write books really quickly. Any biographies I'd ever seen, people always took a really long time.
How did you get into writing them? Where did that start for you?
Well, I started writing my first novel when I was 10. And I
It's a long process of development.
Where are we now? Just put the finishing touches to it. No, and hilariously, because the other thing is as well, like the other writer's poison is that however happy you are with what you're doing, there's always somebody else who's done something better. So I remember I started. When I was about 8. I mean, that's the point at which you start functioning as an adult and thinking as an adult. And I thought, I loved reading so much. I thought, I want to be a writer, when I grow up. So then it's like, well, I'll start now. The neighbour from across the road very kindly brought in a book that had been published by, I think in the 30s, and I can't remember. I just remember them eating cherries, and it was like a sort of it was a coy romance. It was very funny. It's very well known, and because I haven't got Google here, I can't tell you what it is. But it was written by a girl of 10, and I remember thinking, that's it, it's all over for me. I'm never, she's got there first. And so I think there's, you have to be careful that you don't spend your whole life, that you look at your success and then you think, oh, but somebody else is doing better. So the answer to that is that I had thought, you talked about how, are there people who just become writers? And I think, very few. And I had thought, well, what I'm going to do is live an interesting life and then start writing when I'm 30 and travel the world. And I had my daughter, and then that kind of, you have to find work. I had my daughter when I was quite young. You have to find work, you have to maybe put your dreams on hold. And then when I was 29, I thought, like, really, am I going to do this? Will I try and do this? So I started writing my first book. I had travelled with my daughter, I had had a good life, and that was just something, that was the crunch, am I going to do it? And because I was working full time, because I was looking after my daughter, it really did take me a long time.